In the summer of 1996, 6 cousins ventured into the vast canyons of West Texas. They were last seen at a remote trailhead, laughing, carrying packs filled with camping gear, and promising their parents they'd be back by Sunday night. But they never returned. Their tents were found pitched neatly at the base of the canyon, their food untouched, their gear carefully arranged, as if they'd only stepped away for a moment. Their footprints led down into the canyon's winding paths, then stopped, abruptly, on a flat stretch of sun-baked rock. No bodies were ever recovered, no evidence of struggle, no answers. For nearly 30 years, their families have lived with unbearable silence, haunted by what the desert may be hiding. Subscribe for more stories where the truth hides in the silence, and the silence holds the darkest secrets. The canyon lay empty under the fading light, the air shimmering with the day's heat. Red stone walls rose like cathedral towers, catching the last fire of the sun. Shadows crept long and thin across the desert floor. Ranger Alan Whitmore stood at the edge of the trail, binoculars raised. He had been part of search operations before. Hikers lost, children strayed too far from campgrounds, even a tourist who fell into a ravine. But this was different. 6 young people, all cousins, all vanished as if the canyon itself had swallowed them. He lowered the binoculars and wiped sweat from his brow. Around him, other searchers moved through the brush. Volunteers from nearby towns, deputies in wide-brimmed hats, dogs tugging against their handlers. The animals barked, restless, their noses catching scents that led nowhere. The sun dropped lower. The stone walls seemed to change color, glowing orange, then crimson, then sinking into purple shadow. Whitmore's partner, a younger ranger with a dust-caked uniform, joined him. "They're saying the prints just stop," the younger man said. Whitmore nodded. "I saw. 6 sets. You can follow them clear as day down the trail. Then halfway across a flat span, nothing, like they just lifted off." The younger ranger crossed his arms, uneasy. Could be the rock was too hard. Wind erased the dust. Whitmore shook his head. Wind can smooth edges. Doesn't erase 6 kids in the same spot. Behind them, one of the deputies radioed something. His voice carried faintly on the hot air. Nothing here, nothing anywhere. Whitmore looked out across the canyon, the landscape stretching endless and merciless. He imagined the cousins' parents, waiting back at the ranger station, clutching photographs, asking the same questions over and over. He tried to picture the 6 kids, their laughter bouncing off these canyon walls, their energy rising with the sun, their voices growing smaller as they descended deeper. Now silence pressed heavy, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Whitmore's chest tightened. He had worked these lands for 20 years. He knew the canyon could be cruel, that it demanded respect. But this absence, this clean erasure, felt like something else. Something watching. As night fell, the searchers lit their lanterns, pinpricks of human light swallowed by the vast dark. From the rim above, the canyon yawned, ancient and silent, as if it had always known it would keep its secrets. And beneath the shadows, something stirred. The road to Perdido Canyon was older than memory. A narrow stretch of asphalt unfurled through mesquite brush and dry grass, wavering in the late summer heat. On either side, barbed wire fences sagged under the weight of time. Clare Arden kept both hands tight on the steering wheel. Her rental car rattled slightly at every dip in the road, the air conditioner straining against the desert heat. It was her first time driving into this part of West Texas, but the land looked the way she imagined it would. Endless, sunburnt, silent. She checked the GPS again. Just 30 more miles until the ranger station. Clare had covered missing persons cases before. As a freelance journalist, she had written about cold cases in rural Appalachia, human trafficking investigations near the border, and even the occasional high-profile disappearance that made headlines for a week before fading into obscurity. But the story of the 6 missing cousins had been different. It had haunted her since she was a teenager. She remembered seeing their faces on the evening news in 1996, grainy school photos lined up on the screen. 3 boys, 3 girls, aged between 15 and 21. She remembered her mother's voice behind her whispering, "Those poor families. They'll never get answers out there in that wilderness." Claire had carried the story with her for nearly 3 decades. 6 children bound by blood, gone without a trace. Their parents had aged with grief. Their younger siblings had grown up in the shadow of absence, and the canyon had remained silent. Now, with a true crime documentary channel offering to bankroll her next project, she finally had an excuse to follow that silence to its source. The ranger station appeared at last, a squat building of weathered wood and stone perched near the canyon rim. 2 pickup trucks were parked outside, one coated with a thin layer of dust, the other newer, its decals marking it as official park service. Claire pulled into the lot and killed the engine. For a moment, she just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at the open land beyond the station. The canyon stretched out past the rim, a vast wound in the earth. From here, it looked eternal, layer upon layer of red rock descending into shadow, like the ribs of some prehistoric animal. Her phone buzzed. A text from her producer back in New York. "Remember, you're the face on camera. Play it slow. Let the mystery breathe. We'll add the cinematic music later." Claire smirked faintly. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was content. But beneath that, deeper than her producer's expectations, she felt the weight of something larger. A promise she had made to herself long ago. "If I ever get the chance, I'll find out what happened to them." She stepped out of the car, the heat slamming into her, dry and oppressive. Inside the ranger station, the air smelled faintly of dust and coffee. Maps lined the walls, showing the canyon's veins of trails and sheer drops. Behind the counter sat a man in his 60s, skin tanned like leather, hair gone mostly white. He wore the ranger's uniform with an ease that suggested decades of habit. "Afternoon," he said, looking up from a clipboard. His voice was gravelly, but not unfriendly. "Hi," Claire replied, offering a hand. "Claire Arden. We spoke on the phone. I'm here to look into the 96 disappearance." The ranger's eyes sharpened, recognition flickering. He stood and shook her hand, his grip firm. "Alan Whitmore. I was here when it happened." The name hit her immediately. She had read it in old articles. Ranger Alan Whitmore, one of the first on the scene. "I appreciate you meeting with me," Claire said. He gestured toward a row of chairs near the window. "Let's sit. You've come a long way." They settled into the chairs, the canyon sprawling just beyond the glass. Alan studied her for a moment. "You know, most folks stopped asking questions about those kids a long time ago. Families moved away. Media lost interest. But you come out here after almost 30 years. Why now?" Claire met his gaze steadily. "Because I don't think this should stay buried. 6 young people don't just vanish. There has to be something we've missed, and sometimes time brings new eyes, new ways of looking at things." Alan nodded slowly, though his expression stayed guarded. "They were good kids," he said at last, "at least from what I remember. Full of energy, loud, laughing, just being young. I still see their faces sometimes. Not the photos the news used, but how they looked out here. Dust on their boots, sun on their shoulders." Claire leaned forward. "Tell me about the search." What you saw, Alan exhaled, his eyes drifting to the canyon outside. "We started with footprints, 6 sets, clear as day, leading down into Perdido Canyon. Followed them past the creek bed, onto that flat stretch of limestone, and then nothing. Like they all stepped off the earth at once." The silence hung heavy. "No signs of struggle?" Claire asked. "None. Their camp was untouched. Food still sealed, Water bottles lined up neat. That's what chilled me most. If it was dehydration or heat stroke, you'd expect chaos, panic. But the sight looked arranged. A shiver ran down Claire's spine. Arranged by who? Alan shook his head. That's the question, isn't it? We scoured every crevice, every trail. Dogs picked up scents, lost them in the wind. We sent helicopters, volunteers, weeks of searching. And still, nothing. Claire glanced at her notes, her pen hovering. The case file mentioned locals reporting strange lights around that time. Do you remember that? Alan's mouth tightened. I remember folks seeing what they wanted to see. Lights, shadows, figures on the ridgeline. This land plays tricks, especially on the mind. Doesn't mean anything, but you don't believe that, Claire pressed gently. Alan's jaw worked. Finally, he said, what I believe doesn't matter. The canyon doesn't give up what it takes. For a long moment, they sat in silence. The only sound, the low hum of the air conditioner. Claire broke it first. I'd like to hike down tomorrow, see the site for myself. Alan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't refuse. You'll need a permit. And a guide. This land eats the unprepared. Will you come with me? She asked. His gaze held hers, hard and unreadable. Then he nodded once. Sunrise. We'll go where it all began. That night, Claire checked into a faded motel 20 miles from the canyon. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, casting pink light across the cracked parking lot. She set her camera on the dresser, recording a short log for her producer. Day 1. Spoke with Ranger Alan Whitmore. He was there in '96. He remembers everything. Tomorrow he's taking me to the original site. He's reluctant, but I can tell it still haunts him. The way he talked about their camp, about how orderly it was. It felt like he was describing a stage, not a campsite. Like someone wanted it to be found that way. She paused, staring at her reflection in the camera's small screen. The exhaustion in her eyes surprised her. They were kids, she whispered, and they never came home. She switched off the camera, lay back on the bed, and listened to the hum of the old air conditioner. Outside, the desert night pressed close, vast and unknowable. Somewhere out there, under tons of rock and decades of silence, the canyon still held its shadows. The sun was barely up when Claire pulled into the ranger station again. Pale light spilled across the horizon, tinting the desert in hues of rose and gold. The canyon rim, jagged and immense, cut a dark line against the awakening sky. Alan Whitmore was already there, standing beside a government-issued SUV, loading gear into the back. His movements were methodical, practiced, a man who had spent half his life preparing for the canyon. Claire stepped out of her car, slinging her pack over her shoulder. Morning, she said. He glanced up, gave a curt nod. You'll need water. Minimum 3 liters. The canyon's not kind to those who underestimate it. She patted her pack. I've got 4. Good. He tossed a coiled rope inside the SUV, then closed the hatch with a firm slam. Let's go before the heat sets in. They drove in silence, the SUV bumping along the dirt road that snaked toward the trailhead. Claire kept her eyes on the horizon, watching the way the sun carved light into the canyon walls. Layers of sediment rose like pages of an ancient book, each one older than the last. She thought of the 6 cousins making this same descent nearly 30 years ago, laughing, teasing, unaware they were walking into history. At the trailhead, Alan killed the engine. The land around them was vast and empty, the silence broken only by the chirr of insects and the faint rustle of wind. This is where they left the car, Alan said, pointing to the gravel turnout. A red Dodge van. Belonged to one of their uncles. We kept it impounded for months after, hoping it held answers. But it didn't. Claire made a mental note. She'd want to find out what happened to that van, whether it had been returned to the family, whether it had been examined again with modern forensics. They shouldered their packs and began down the trail. The path twisted through dry brush, then narrowed as it hugged the canyon wall. The drop beside them plunged into shadow, vertigo-inducing in its depth. Alan moved with quiet confidence, his boots finding each foothold without hesitation. Claire followed carefully, her pulse quickening as loose gravel shifted beneath her. "This is where they walked," Alan said over his shoulder. 6 sets of prints. Easy to follow. Kids don't know how much they leave behind. You could see them clear as day in the dust. Claire imagined it. 6 cousins striding down this same trail, unaware that each step was leading them closer to erasure. After half an hour, the trail widened onto a plateau. Alan stopped, pointing to a faint depression in the stone. "This is where we found the campsite." Claire approached slowly. The ground here was smooth, sun-bleached limestone, cracked with time. She knelt, brushing her fingers across the surface. She couldn't see any trace of tents or footprints now, but the way Alan spoke, it was as if the ghosts of the site still lingered. "They pitched 3 tents," Alan said. 2 small ones, 1 bigger. Gear arranged neatly. Food unopened, their packs still there, like they planned to stay. Claire stood, scanning the plateau. The silence pressed heavy, as though the canyon itself was listening. And nothing was disturbed? No sign of struggle? Alan shook his head. Nothing. That's what never sat right with me. People don't just vanish like that. Something happened here. But the land swallowed every trace. They continued, following a faint trail that cut deeper into the canyon. The sun was higher now, light flooding the walls in crimson and gold. Heat rose in waves, baking the stone. Claire's shirt clung damp to her back. She drank from her water bottle, the plastic already warm in her hand. Alan stopped suddenly ahead of her. "Here," he said. Claire caught up, panting lightly. They stood on a broad expanse of flat rock. It stretched like a natural stage, smooth and pale, gleaming under the sun. "This is where their footprints stopped," Alan said quietly. Claire looked down. The stone was bare, unbroken by any sign of passage. No dust, no debris, nothing but endless flatness. She crouched, touching the surface. It was hot, almost burning against her palm. "You're saying 6 sets of prints led right here, and then nothing?" Alan nodded. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on the stone as if it still held secrets. "They ended at the edge of this slab. Perfectly, like someone wiped the slate clean. No drag marks, no scattered gear, no blood. Just silence." Claire's throat tightened. "What do you think happened?" Alan didn't answer at first. He kept staring at the stone, jaw working. Finally, he said, "I think they walked into something we don't understand." The words lingered in the heat. Claire straightened, scanning the canyon around them. The silence felt deeper here, oppressive. A hawk circled overhead, its cry distant, almost mocking. She pulled out her camera, filming a slow pan across the slab of stone. 6 cousins, 6 sets of footprints, all ending here, and nothing since. Almost 30 years of searching, and the canyon has given nothing back. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke. She steadied herself, forcing calm into her tone. Alan turned away, beginning back up the trail. "That's enough for today. Heat'll kill us if we stay longer." Claire followed reluctantly, glancing back one last time at the smooth slab. It seemed to gleam in the sun, blank and pitiless, a canvas scrubbed clean. On the climb back, Alan said little. His silence felt weighted, as if the canyon had pressed its secrets into him, and he carried them like a burden. When they reached the SUV, Claire tossed her pack inside and leaned against the door, gulping water. Sweat plastered her hair to her forehead. Alan stared out at the canyon rim. "You know," he said slowly, "sometimes I wonder if we weren't meant to find them. If that slab wasn't just rock, but a wall, A boundary, something saying, "This is where the trail ends." Claire swallowed hard. "But boundaries can be crossed." He looked at her, eyes narrowing. "Not always." The drive back was quiet. Claire filmed short segments on her phone. Wide shots of the canyon, Alan's lined face in profile, the dust cloud rising behind the tires. But her mind kept returning to the stone slab, to the way Alan's voice had dropped when he spoke of boundaries. That night, back at the motel, she transferred her footage to her laptop. Frame by frame, she studied the plateau, the flat stone expanse where 6 young lives had ended in silence. She paused, zooming in on the edge of the slab. For a second, she thought she saw something, a faint discoloration, a pattern in the rock that didn't quite belong. She leaned closer, heart racing. It almost looked like letters. Just as she adjusted the brightness, the screen flickered. A glitch, maybe, or her tired eyes playing tricks. When the image settled, the pattern was gone. Claire sat back, staring at the empty rock. The silence of the canyon pressed against her again, even here in the stale motel air. She whispered into the quiet, "What happened to you?" The laptop screen glowed back at her, blank as the stone. The following morning, Claire drove into the town of San Isidro, 30 miles east of Perdido Canyon. The town was little more than a cluster of weathered buildings around a courthouse square, its population unchanged since the cousins disappeared in 1996. The streets were quiet, shutters drawn against the heat. A faded mural on the side of the diner showed a painted canyon scene with the words, "Welcome to San Isidro, gateway to the shadows." Claire parked outside the library, where she had arranged to meet the first of the families. She checked her notes. Evelyn Torres, aunt to 2 of the cousins, and the woman who had given the original press conference all those years ago. Inside, the library smelled of paper and dust. Rows of shelves held more empty space than books. At a table near the window sat Evelyn, now in her late 60s, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a faded floral dress and clutched a rosary in her hands as if it had grown into her fingers. "Mrs. Torres?" Claire asked softly. The woman looked up. Her eyes were sharp despite the wrinkles around them. "You're the reporter." "I am. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Evelyn gestured to the chair across from her. "I don't know how much I can tell you. 30 years doesn't sharpen the memory. It dulls it. But some things—" Her voice caught. "Some things don't fade." Claire sat, placing her recorder on the table. "I'd like to hear about that summer." About the cousins, Evelyn nodded slowly. "They were close. Closer than most families, I think. Their parents, my brothers and sisters, wanted them to know each other, to grow up together. They spent every summer here in San Isidro, swimming in the river, running through the fields. That summer, they wanted one last adventure before the older ones went to college." Her fingers twisted the rosary. The canyon was supposed to be safe. They had camped before. They knew how to take care of themselves. "We thought—" She trailed off, eyes fixed on some distant point. Claire leaned forward gently. "Do you remember the last time you saw them?" Evelyn's lips pressed tight. "Yes, at the trailhead. They were loud, teasing each other, posing for a picture with the van. I told them not to stay out too long in the sun. My nephew, Tomas, he laughed and said, 'Don't worry, Tia. We'll be back before you miss us.'" Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. "We waited that Sunday night. And then the sheriff came." The silence that followed was heavy. Claire let it linger before asking, "Over the years there have been theories. Some people said it was an accident. Others said they ran away. Some blamed—" She hesitated. "Foul play." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "They didn't run away. My nieces and nephews weren't perfect, but they weren't cruel. They wouldn't have done that to us. As for foul play—" She lowered her voice. This town has always had shadows, Miss Arden. People here keep secrets. We thought the canyon took them. But sometimes I wonder if it wasn't the canyon at all. Claire felt a chill despite the warmth of the room. Do you think someone local was involved? Evelyn didn't answer directly. She glanced toward the shelves as if afraid someone might be listening. Ask the Caldwells, she said at last. They lost 2 boys, and they never forgave anyone for it. After the interview, Claire sat in her car jotting notes. Evelyn had given her little in hard evidence, but much in suggestion. Shadows, secrets. The canyon or something else? She tapped her pen against the steering wheel. Evelyn's warning felt less like memory and more like accusation. That afternoon, Claire drove to the outskirts of town to meet the Caldwells. Their ranch sat beyond a rusted gate, fields stretching dry and brown under the sun. An older man was mending fence posts when she pulled up, his back bent, his hands raw from work. He glanced at her warily as she approached. Mr. Caldwell? He straightened slowly. His face was leathery, his eyes pale blue. Depends who's asking. Clare Arden. I'm investigating the disappearance in '96. I understand your sons. His eyes hardened. My sons are gone. Claire hesitated. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. You want a story, he said flatly. Everyone wants a story. Well, I don't have one for you. I buried my boys without coffins. You understand? Without coffins, Claire swallowed. I'm not here to exploit. I want to understand he studied her for a long moment, then spat into the dust. Understand this. They didn't just vanish. Someone took them. Her pulse quickened. You believe it was foul play? His eyes flickered toward the horizon, where the canyon cut across the land like a scar. The canyon hides things, but men hide worse. We told the sheriff then. We told the rangers. Nobody listened. What did you tell them? Claire pressed gently. That we saw strangers, Caldwell said. His voice dropped. 2 nights before the kids went missing, we saw men near the trailhead. Not hikers, not locals, just watching. I told the sheriff. He said it was nothing. Claire's pen scratched furiously. Do you remember what they looked like? Tall. One of them had a limp. Both wore hats pulled low, didn't speak. Just stood there staring at the canyon like they were waiting for something. Did anyone else see them? My wife did. His voice cracked slightly. She never forgot. A screen door slammed. A woman appeared on the porch, thin and gray-haired, her hands gripping the railing. Henry, she called sharply. Caldwell looked back at Claire, his jaw set. That's enough. We don't talk about it anymore. He turned and walked toward the house, leaving her standing by the gate, dust swirling in the hot air. Claire climbed back into her car, her pulse racing. She replayed his words in her mind. Men near the trailhead, watching, waiting. Back at the motel, she uploaded the day's interviews, listening again to Evelyn's whispers and Caldwell's gravelly anger. Both spoke of secrets, of shadows beyond the canyon itself. She stared at the map spread across her desk. Perdido Canyon cut across it like a wound. Beside it, small marks showed ranches, roads, ghost towns long abandoned. 6 cousins, 6 vanished lives, parents and grandparents left with silence, and somewhere, maybe, the truth. She picked up her camera, speaking directly to it. Day 2. The families are divided. Evelyn Torres believes the town itself holds secrets. Henry Caldwell is certain strangers were involved. Neither believes the official story, that the canyon simply erased them. The deeper I go, the more it feels like the canyon wasn't the only shadow they were walking into. Her voice trembled slightly at the last line. She shut off the camera and leaned back, rubbing her temples. Outside, the neon sign of the motel flickered against the night. Beyond that, the desert stretched endless and black. Claire wondered how many secrets could be buried before the ground itself split open to release them. The San Isidro courthouse was a boxy, sun-faded structure at the edge of town, its bricks the color of dried blood. A single flag flapped listlessly in the breeze outside, its fabric frayed by decades of desert wind. Claire stepped inside, her notebook tucked under one arm, the weight of her camera bag pulling on her shoulder. The lobby smelled faintly of floor polish and dust. A clerk behind a glass window peered at her over a stack of files. "Help you?" Claire slid her press badge beneath the glass. "Claire Arden. I'm researching the 1996 Canyon disappearance. I submitted a request last month for access to public records." The clerk shuffled through a stack of papers, found her form, and frowned. "Those files aren't usually circulated. They're sensitive." "They're public record," Claire said evenly. "It's been nearly 3 decades. The clerk hesitated, then buzzed a phone on her desk. After a moment, she said, "Sheriff Garrison will see you." Claire followed her directions down a narrow hallway lined with photos of past sheriffs. Most were stern-faced men in uniform, the kind who looked carved from the land itself. At the end of the hall, a door opened. Sheriff Clay Garrison was younger than she expected, in his 40s, with a buzz cut and a crisp uniform. He shook her hand firmly, his eyes pale and appraising. "You're digging into old bones," he said, gesturing her into his office. "Not sure what you expect to find. My daddy was sheriff back then. He ran that search himself." Claire sat across from his desk. "I expect to find clarity." "The families are still asking questions. The canyon never gave them answers." Garrison leaned back, folding his arms. "Sometimes there aren't answers. Sometimes people make mistakes in the wilderness. Heat stroke, falls. Predators happens more than you'd think, but 6 at once," Claire countered. "And with no trace." His jaw tightened. "You sound like you've been talking to the Caldwells." "I've spoken with several families," she said carefully. "Each one believes something was missed." He studied her a long moment. Then, with a sigh, he pulled open a drawer and set a thick file on the desk. The folder was battered, its edges curled with age. "This is the original report," he said. "But I'll warn you, it's not as exciting as you'd hope." Paperwork never is. Claire flipped it open, her pulse quickening. Pages of typed statements, maps with trails marked, lists of evidence cataloged and signed. She ran her finger down the first page. Missing Persons Report. October 1996. 6 subjects. She read quickly, scanning for detail. The families reported them overdue by 12 hours. Search began at dawn. Campsite found undisturbed. Footprints traced, then lost. But then something caught her eye. Witness statement, October 11th, 1996. Reported by rancher Henry Caldwell. Observed 2 unknown men near Perdido Canyon trailhead, date of October 9th. Described one as tall, limping, wearing dark hat. Second male, average build, hat pulled low. Observed watching canyon for extended period. Report taken by Deputy R. Harker. Claire's pulse spiked. She looked up at Garrison. "This statement wasn't in the summaries I read online." He shrugged. "Not everything made it to the press." "Why not?" "Because people see strangers all the time." Didn't mean anything, but the Caldwells believed it did. They still do. Garrison's eyes hardened. "Miss Arden, this is ranch country. Strangers show up, drifters, migrant workers, hunters. My father didn't think it was relevant, and neither do I." Claire leaned closer. "But if they were there days before the disappearance, if they were watching—" "Speculation," he cut her off sharply. She forced herself to breathe. "What about follow-up? Did deputies canvass nearby towns? Ask about men matching the description?" His silence was answer enough. She flipped further through the file. More statements, more maps. And then another inconsistency. Evidence log. October 13th, 1996. Recovered item, torn fabric, possible backpack strap. Location, 0.7 miles from campsite. entered into evidence by Deputy R. Harker. Clare frowned. This log says a torn strap was recovered. What happened to it? Garrison glanced down. Don't know. I'll check. You don't know. It was almost 30 years ago, he said curtly. Storage systems weren't what they are now. She met his gaze, holding it. So evidence went missing. His expression darkened. You're twisting words. Clare sat back, her pulse hammering. She could feel the line between cooperation and hostility tightening. Closing the file, she said, I'd like copies of these documents. He hesitated. Then, grudgingly, Fine, clerk will arrange it. She gathered her notes, thanked him, and rose. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Miss Arden, she turned. You dig too deep into this, you're going to find more than you want. The canyon swallows things for a reason. His eyes held hers, flat and cold. Clare left the office, her breath unsteady. Outside in the courthouse square, she sat on a bench beneath a dying oak tree and opened her notebook. She scribbled furiously, 2 unidentified men, trailhead. Witness ignored. Torn strap, logged, then lost. Sheriff's office dismissive. Possible cover-up? Her mind raced. Was it incompetence or something darker? That night, back at the motel, she spread the photocopies across the bedspread. She filmed them one by one for her camera, narrating softly. October 1996. The official story is simple. 6 cousins went camping and never came home, but the files show something else. Witness reports of strangers near the trailhead. Evidence recovered, then lost. The sheriff's office dismissed it all. Was it negligence? Or was there a reason to bury these leads? Her voice trembled slightly, the enormity pressing in. She switched off the camera and stared at the papers. The canyon's silence had been reinforced by authority, by pen and stamp and shrug. Outside, the desert night was still, but Clare couldn't shake the sense of eyes watching from the dark. The next morning, Clare sat at the diner on Main Street with a cup of bitter coffee and a plate of eggs she had barely touched. Outside, the neon open sign flickered against the pale light of dawn. Inside, a handful of locals murmured over their breakfasts, boots scuffing against the linoleum floor. Her laptop screen glowed faintly, displaying the photocopies she had made of the sheriff's files. Her eyes lingered on one name again and again. Deputy R. Harker. He had taken Henry Caldwell's report about the 2 strangers. He had logged the torn strap found near the campsite. Both leads had vanished, absorbed by silence. Clare tapped her pen against her notebook. Who were you, Deputy Harker? She whispered. The waitress, a woman with weathered hands and tired eyes, approached with the coffee pot. Refill, please. As she poured, the woman nodded toward Clare's papers. You working on that canyon story? Clare looked up, surprised. Yes, why? The woman's expression shifted, something between interest and wariness. My brother-in-law knew Harker. Said he wasn't the same after those kids went missing. Quit the force a few years later. Started drinking heavy. Died young. Clare's pen froze. Where did he live? Out near the old highway. Trailer park by the grain silos. Place is still there, I think. His boy keeps it. Clare scribbled the directions. Thank you. The woman shrugged. Some people say Harker saw things in that canyon he wasn't meant to. He never talked about it. Just carried it with him until it killed him. By noon, Clare was bumping down a gravel road past rusted silos. The trailer park sat on the edge of the desert, sun-bleached metal boxes lined in crooked rows. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. She parked near a sagging double-wide with peeling paint. A man in his 30s sat on the porch steps, smoking. He had Harker's name in the lines of his jaw, though his hair was long and unkempt. Clare climbed out, raising a hand. Hi, are you Daniel Harker? The man squinted through the smoke. Who's asking? I'm Clare Arden. I'm a journalist looking into the canyon disappearance. Your father—" His face darkened. "My father's dead. I know. But his name appears in the records. I was hoping you might talk to me about him." Daniel took a long drag, then exhaled slowly. "You're not the first to come poking." Most give up when they realize he didn't leave much behind. "I'm not looking for souvenirs. I'm looking for truth." He studied her, then stubbed out the cigarette. "Come on then." Inside, the trailer smelled faintly of dust and motor oil. The blinds were half drawn, casting slats of shadow across the worn furniture. On the coffee table sat a stack of unopened mail and an old revolver, polished to a shine. Daniel poured himself a glass of water and gestured toward the couch. "You want to know about my dad? He was a good cop, at least at first. Took the job serious, thought he was protecting people. But after 96, his voice faltered. He was never the same." "What changed?" Claire asked. Daniel sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "He came home that week looking like he'd seen a ghost. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. Just sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. My mom asked what was wrong. He just kept saying, 'I can't put it on paper.' They won't believe me." Claire's pulse quickened. "Do you know what he meant?" Daniel shook his head. "No, he never told us. But he started drinking after that. Got mean. Lost the job. Died in a crash when I was 19. Silence filled the small room. Claire's eyes drifted to a cardboard box shoved under the coffee table. "May I?" she asked. Daniel shrugged. She pulled it out. Inside were old files, photos, scraps of his father's life. Among them, she found a small notebook, its pages yellowed. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The entries were sparse, scrawled in uneven handwriting. October 11th, 1996. Interviewed Caldwell. 2 men at Trailhead. Don't match locals. Gave description. Sheriff says drop it. October 13. Found torn strap. Sheriff says not significant. Logged anyway. He was angry. Told me to burn it. I didn't. Hid it. Claire's breath caught. She turned the page. October 14. Something in the canyon. Saw movement by the slab. Sheriff says it's tricks of heat. But I saw. Eyes in the dark. Not human. Can't put it on paper. They'll call me crazy. Her heart pounded. She read the final entry. November 2nd. Sheriff says case is closed. Told me to shut my mouth. But I keep dreaming of the canyon. Kids standing at the edge, waiting. Claire looked up, her hands shaking. "Do you still have the strap?" Daniel frowned. "What strap?" "Your father wrote he hid it." He shook his head. "If he did, it wasn't here when we cleared the trailer. Maybe he buried it. Maybe someone else took it." Claire closed the notebook carefully. "This is important. Could I hold on to it?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Take it. Maybe it'll do more good with you than gathering dust here." As Claire drove back toward town, the notebook sat heavy on the passenger seat. Her thoughts spun. A deputy ordered to burn evidence, witnesses ignored, and a man haunted by something he claimed he saw, something not human. Back at the motel, she set up her camera, the notebook open before her. "This changes everything," she said, her voice low, urgent. Deputy Robert Harker documented that the sheriff told him to destroy evidence, a torn strap found near the cousins' campsite. He also claimed to have seen movement near the slab of stone, something he couldn't explain. He wrote, "Eyes in the dark. Not human." Was he unraveling from guilt, or did he witness something real? Either way, this suggests more than negligence. It suggests suppression. She turned off the camera and sat in silence, her pulse racing. The desert night pressed against the motel windows, the hum of insects rising. Claire felt it again, that sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes in the dark. She whispered into the stillness, "What did you see, Deputy Harker?" The only answer was silence. The motel's ice machine rattled and hummed as Claire filled a paper cup, the sound echoing through the dim hallway. It was close to midnight, but she couldn't sleep. The notebook from Deputy Harker sat on her desk, its yellowed pages tugging at her thoughts like a hook in her chest. She poured the ice water, sat down, and opened her laptop. It was time to stop thinking of the cousins as names on a case file and start seeing them as people. 6 young lives, 6 personalities, 6 sets of secrets. She typed each name into the database she had access to through her paper. Tomas Torres, 19, the oldest. Athletic, college-bound, considered the ringleader. Isabel Torres, 17, his sister, aspiring artist, described as quiet, thoughtful. Ricky Caldwell, 18, one of the Caldwell boys, trouble with school, but loyal to family. Danny Caldwell, 15, younger brother, eager to impress. Angela Barrett, 16, visiting from Houston, said to be restless, rebellious. Michael Barrett, 14, Angela's cousin, shy, bookish. The ages hit her harder than she expected. Teenagers on the edge of adulthood, lost before they had a chance to decide who they were. She dug deeper, pulling yearbook pages, archived news clippings, and eventually, through a subscription database, fragments of police interview transcripts. And then she found something. Interview, Teresa Martinez, teacher, October 1996. Tomas was a natural leader, but he carried pressure. He worried about things most kids didn't. That summer he seemed distracted. I overheard him arguing once with Angela Barrett in the hallway. She told him, "If you don't tell them, I will." I don't know what it meant, but he looked furious and she looked scared. Claire's stomach tightened. She read the line again and again. "If you don't tell them, I will." Tell who? Tell what? She turned to Angela Barrett, 16, the restless one. The file said she'd been living with her grandmother that summer after family difficulties in Houston. No detail was given. Claire scribbled the words in her notebook. Angela, conflict with Tomas. Secret threatened. She cross-referenced the families. Barretts and Tereses were first cousins. Their parents were siblings. It was a tight-knit circle, every summer spent together. But there were tensions too. The next morning she drove to a low stucco house on the edge of San Isidro. It belonged to Martha Barrett, Angela's aunt, who still lived in town. Claire had arranged the visit through a distant cousin who acted as go-between. Martha was in her 70s now, her eyes sharp behind thick glasses. She welcomed Claire in with cautious hospitality, the smell of strong coffee filling the air. "I still keep Angela's room," she said quietly, leading Claire down a narrow hallway. "Haven't changed it since that summer. My sister, Angela's mother, asked me to. The room was a time capsule. Posters of 90s bands on the wall, a desk stacked with yellowing notebooks, a hairbrush with a few strands of long dark hair still caught in its bristles." Claire's throat tightened. "She was staying with you that summer?" Martha nodded. Her parents were going through a separation. Things were rough in Houston. She needed space, but Angela was unsettled, restless like a horse that doesn't take the bit. She'd sneak out at night, always testing limits. "Do you remember if she had conflicts with Tomas?" Martha's gaze sharpened. "Where did you hear that?" "I found a teacher's statement. It mentioned they argued." Martha's lips pressed thin. She sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the quilt. "Yes, I heard them once myself, on the porch. Tomas was telling her to keep quiet about something. She said she was tired of keeping secrets, that it wasn't fair." Claire's pulse quickened. "Did you hear what it was about?" Martha shook her head. "They hushed when they realized I was listening. But Angela cried afterward. Locked herself in here for hours." The silence between them was thick. Claire finally asked, "Do you think Angela was hiding something?" Martha's voice dropped. "Every teenager hides something, but this felt heavier. I used to wonder if it had something to do with the canyon. Claire tilted her head. How so? She loved that place. More than the others. She'd sneak off to draw the cliffs, the rocks. Said she felt pulled there. The week before they vanished, I found sketches in her notebook. Dark shapes in the canyon. Figures, she said, were watching from the rim Claire's breath caught. Do you still have the sketches? Martha rose and opened a drawer. She pulled out a thin notebook, its pages curled with age. Inside were pencil drawings. Jagged canyon walls, looming shadows. On one page, 6 figures standing in a line, hand in hand at the edge of a cliff. On another, 2 dark forms lurking behind them. Claire's skin prickled. Did she ever explain these? Martha shook her head. Just said she had bad dreams. Said she felt like the canyon was alive, and it wanted something from them. Claire traced the pencil lines with her eyes. The 2 figures, tall, watchful, faceless. Strangers by the trailhead? Or something else? When she returned to her motel that evening, the sun was setting, painting the sky in crimson streaks. She laid Angela's sketches beside Harker's notebook. The parallels were chilling. Angela drew strangers, faceless and looming. Harker wrote of eyes in the dark. Caldwell swore he saw men at the trailhead. 3 voices, disconnected, describing the same presence. She filmed her thoughts in a low whisper. Angela Barrett was restless, troubled, and hiding something. Weeks before the disappearance, she argued with Thomas, threatening to reveal a secret he wanted buried. She filled her notebook with drawings of the canyon and of figures watching from the rim. Deputy Harker, who found evidence the sheriff ordered destroyed, also claimed to see something watching in the canyon. 3 testimonies, decades apart, pointing to the same shadow. She closed the notebook gently, her heart pounding. If Angela's secret tied her to Tomas, if the 2 of them knew something, then the trip into the canyon wasn't just a carefree adventure. It was a collision course, and 6 cousins had walked straight into its path. The library's microfilm machine whirred like an insect as Claire scrolled through yellowed newspapers. Headlines flickered across the dim screen. Farm bill passes Senate. Local parade honors veterans. High school football season ends in victory. Then, one headline froze her breath. April 1993. Bonfire ritual sighted near Perdido Canyon. She leaned closer. The article was short, almost dismissive. A rancher reported strange lights in the canyon at night. Chanting carried on the wind. Authorities investigated but found no evidence. Sheriff at the time called it college kids having fun. Claire scribbled in her notebook, Canyon Rituals, 1993, 3 years before disappearances. She scrolled further. Another article, June 1993. Trespassers at Canyon campsite. Evidence of animal remains. Authorities again dismissed it as poachers. No charges filed. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't proof, but a pattern. Whispers ignored, reports minimized. She pulled the roll of microfilm from the machine and slipped it back into its case, the silence of the library pressing close. That afternoon, she drove to the edge of town where the desert gave way to broken rock. Her destination was a ramshackle trailer belonging to Tom Gentry, a retired park ranger who had worked in Perdido Canyon during the early 90s. The man who answered the door was wiry, with skin leathered by sun and age. His hair was white, his eyes sharp. "Miss Arden," he asked, his voice gravelly. "Mr. Gentry. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." He waved her inside. The trailer smelled faintly of tobacco and pine cleaner. Maps and old ranger badges decorated the walls. "You want to know about the canyon," he said, settling into a chair. "Nobody asks about that place anymore, not since the kids vanished." "That's exactly why I'm asking," Claire said gently. "Before 96, were there other incidents? Strange sightings? Activity?" Gentry lit a cigarette, his hand steady. Smoke curled into the stale air. Depends what you call strange. Canyon has always had its stories. Old Apache legends, miners who swore they saw fires in the cliffs, folks hearing voices at night. Most of it's superstition. But you saw something, Clare pressed. His gaze shifted. 93. Springtime. We had reports of trespassers building bonfires. I went in with another ranger. We found a clearing near the rim. Charred wood, animal bones, symbols painted on rocks. Looked like ritual stuff. Not kids messing around. Too deliberate. Clare leaned forward. What kind of symbols? He drew an ashtray closer, stubbed his cigarette, and took a pen from his shirt pocket. On a scrap of paper, he sketched a crude shape, a circle with jagged lines radiating inward, intersecting at the center. Clare's breath caught. It was nearly identical to one of Angela Barrett's sketches. Gentry pushed the paper toward her. We reported it. Sheriff's office told us to forget it, said it was teenagers from the college. But I knew better. There was intent behind it, purpose. Did you ever see the people? Once, a week later. Figures moving along the rim at night. Long robes, torches. Too far to identify. When we approached, they scattered. We never caught them. Clare's pen raced. You think it was a cult? Gentry shrugged. That word gets thrown around. Could have been. But whoever they were, they knew that canyon like the back of their hand. They weren't outsiders. Clare froze. You mean locals? His eyes met hers, steady and grim. That's what scared me most. The idea, it wasn't strangers at all. The room felt colder despite the desert heat. Why didn't you speak publicly after the cousins disappeared? She asked. Gentry's jaw tightened. I tried. Sheriff shut me down, said I'd stir panic, said I'd ruin the town's reputation. After that, I kept my mouth shut. But I still wake up nights, hearing that chanting echoing down the cliffs. Clare left the trailer with the paper in her hand, the symbol burning into her mind. The desert stretched endless around her, but she couldn't shake the feeling she was walking inside a circle drawn decades before. Back at the motel, she laid out Angela's sketchbook beside Gentry's scrap of paper. The match was undeniable. She turned on her camera. Today, I learned that in 1993, 3 years before the disappearance, reports surfaced of ritual activity in Perdido Canyon. Former Ranger Tom Gentry described bonfires, animal remains, and painted symbols. The symbol he drew is nearly identical to sketches made by Angela Barrett, one of the cousins who vanished. Angela had argued with her cousin Tomas about a secret she threatened to reveal. Did they know about this activity? Did they stumble onto something they weren't supposed to see? Her voice wavered as she spoke, a chill running down her arms. She shut off the camera and sat in silence, staring at the symbol. The canyon wasn't just a wilderness. It was a stage. And perhaps, in 1996, 6 cousins had become unwilling players in a performance that had been running for years. That night, sleep came in fragments. She dreamed of 6 figures standing on the rim, hand in hand, while shadows in robes circled below. The chanting rose until it became a roar, and when she looked closer, the shadows had faces she recognized. The sheriff, townspeople, even the waitress from the diner. She woke gasping, the motel room drenched in darkness. For a moment, she wasn't sure if the chanting was still echoing in her ears or in the wind outside. The bell over the diner door jingled as Clare stepped inside. The same waitress from before glanced up, recognition flickering in her eyes. The morning rush had passed. Only a handful of ranch hands lingered over their coffee. Clare slid into a booth, laid her notebook on the table, and when the waitress came over, she asked quietly, "Can I show you something?" The woman hesitated, then leaned down. Claire opened the notebook to the crude symbol Ranger Gentry had drawn, the circle with jagged lines. Next to it, she laid Angela Barrett's sketch. The waitress's face blanched. For a moment, her hand trembled on the coffee pot. Then she straightened abruptly. "That'll be eggs and toast." Claire's chest tightened. "You've seen it before." The waitress's jaw set. "Don't know what you're talking about." "You do," Claire pressed. "Where?" The woman's eyes darted toward the ranch hands in the corner. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Best advice? Stop asking. You don't want what comes with it." Then she poured Claire's coffee and walked away without another word. The warning rattled Claire more than if the woman had shouted. Later that afternoon, Claire visited the town's historical society, a cramped building filled with mining tools and sepia photographs. The curator, an elderly man named Elias Rowe, greeted her warmly at first. But when she unrolled Gentry's sketch, his demeanor changed. He pushed his glasses up his nose and said flatly, "Where'd you get that?" "A retired ranger," Claire said. "It matches drawings made by Angela Barrett in 1996. Do you know what it is?" Rowe closed the book he'd been holding with a snap. "Old symbol. Goes back a ways. Miners carved it into rock near the canyon in the 1890s. Said it warded off bad spirits." "Bad spirits?" Claire repeated. "Superstition," he said dismissively, but his hand trembled slightly as he shelved the book. Why would Angela draw it nearly 100 years later? Rowe turned, his expression hard. "I don't know, and I don't care to. Some things are better left in the ground." The conversation was over. As Claire walked back through town, the air felt thicker, eyes following her from shaded porches and pickup trucks. She realized word of her questions was spreading. That night, as she returned to her motel, she found a folded paper tucked under her door. No name, no handwriting she recognized. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sentence, printed in block letters. "Stop digging or the canyon will swallow you too." Claire sat heavily on the bed, the paper shaking in her hands. Fear pooled in her chest, cold and sharp, but underneath it, something harder formed. Resolve. She filmed the note for her camera, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "This morning I showed Angela's sketches and Ranger Gentry's symbol to locals. The reactions were immediate. Fear, denial, hostility. Tonight I found this note under my door. Stop digging or the canyon will swallow you too. This isn't just about old folklore. Someone in this town wants the past to stay buried." She turned off the camera, sat in silence. Her mind replayed Gentry's words. They weren't outsiders. If the rituals weren't strangers, if they were locals, then it wasn't just superstition. It was complicity. The next day, Claire drove back toward the canyon. She wanted to see the place for herself, where Gentry had described bonfires and symbols painted on stone. The trail wound through brittle scrub and jagged rock. Heat shimmered in the distance. After a mile, she reached a clearing. Her breath caught. On a flat rock near the rim, faint carvings were still visible. A circle, jagged lines radiating inward. Time had weathered them, but the shape was unmistakable. She crouched, tracing the grooves with her fingertips. A shiver ran through her despite the heat. Behind her, gravel shifted. She spun around. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, watching. Tall, broad-shouldered, a baseball cap shadowing his face. Claire's heart pounded. "Hello?" He didn't answer, just stared. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, gesturing to the symbol. He took a step closer. His boots crunched in the gravel. Claire backed toward her car. "I'm just researching. I don't want trouble." The man stopped a few feet away, his expression hidden beneath the brim of his cap. His voice was low, gravelly. "You're stirring things better left still. Did you leave the note?" He didn't answer. Instead, he crouched by the carving, ran a calloused finger along its edge, then looked up at her. "That mark's been here longer than you've been alive. You think you're the first to come asking questions? You're not. And the last ones? They never came back." Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean?" His gaze pinned her. 6 cousins. They asked the same questions, same curiosity. "Canyon took 'em, or someone did," Claire whispered. The man rose, towering over her. "Go home, Miss." Arden. He turned and walked into the scrub, vanishing like a shadow in the heat. Claire stumbled back to her car, her hands shaking as she jammed the keys into the ignition. As she drove away, dust billowed behind her like smoke. Her thoughts spiraled. The cousins had argued, had secrets. Angela sketched symbols tied to rituals locals wanted forgotten. A deputy hid evidence. A ranger warned of robed figures. And now strangers, or neighbors, were warning her away. The canyon wasn't just geography. It was a web, and the town was tangled in it. The San Isidro courthouse basement smelled of mildew and dust, the air heavy with decades of paper rot. Claire had spent the morning convincing a clerk to let her comb through archival overflow. Stacks of boxes no one touched unless a subpoena demanded it. She pulled another carton onto the table, brushed dust from its lid, and rifled through folders labeled 1992, 1993, 1994. Then she saw it. Incident report. March 12th, 1993. Her pulse quickened as she unfolded the yellowing pages. Report of disturbance at Perdido Canyon. 2 vehicles parked near Rim Trail after dark. Suspected trespassers. Deputies dispatched. Upon arrival, individuals fled scene. Evidence collected. Remains of small fire, animal bones, symbols painted on rocks. It was almost identical to what Ranger Gentry had described. But Claire's breath caught when she reached the bottom of the page. Subjects identified by vehicle registration. Ford pickup, registered to Miguel Torres. Chevy sedan, registered to Elaine Barrett. Claire's pen froze. Miguel Torres, father of Tomas and Isabel. Elaine Barrett, mother of Angela and Michael, the parents. She skimmed the supplemental note. Deputies attempted follow-up questioning. Both parties denied involvement. Claimed vehicles had been loaned to friends. No charges filed. Sheriff ordered matter closed. Claire sat back, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The cousins' parents had been directly linked to ritual activity in the canyon 3 years before the disappearance. She snapped photos of the file, her hands trembling, then carefully returned the report to its folder. By late afternoon, she was back in her motel room, pacing. The implications tore at her mind. Had the parents known about the rituals all along? Was Angela's argument with Tomas in '96 not about teenage secrets, but about their family's involvement? She replayed the teacher's words in her head. "If you don't tell them, I will." Tell who? Tell about what? Claire imagined Angela threatening to expose the truth, that their own families had ties to whatever happened in the canyon. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Meet me behind the feed store, sunset." Her chest tightened. Another risk. Another shadow beckoning. But she couldn't ignore it. The sun was dropping low when Claire pulled up to the feed store on the edge of town. She parked, stepped out, and circled to the back lot where bales of hay lay stacked against a rusted fence. A figure stood there, half in shadow. It was the waitress from the diner. "You shouldn't be here," the woman said sharply. "You sent the message?" The waitress glanced around, then nodded. Her voice dropped. "I heard what you found in the courthouse. You need to be careful." Claire's throat tightened. "It's true, isn't it?" The Tereses and Barretts were involved. The woman's eyes glistened with fear. Not all of them, but some. In the early '90s, there were gatherings in the canyon, not church gatherings, not parties, something darker. They said it was to keep the town safe, offerings to whatever lived out there. But the truth is, it was power, control. Men, and some women too, meeting in secret. Angela knew, Claire whispered. She knew enough, the waitress said. That's why she argued with Tomas. He wanted to bury it. She wanted it out. And then they all vanished. Do you think they're families? The woman cut her off. Don't say it. Don't even think it too loud. This town protects its own, even the rotten ones. That's why the sheriff shut everything down back then. Too many names would have burned. Claire's voice trembled. So you're telling me the disappearance wasn't random? It was orchestrated? The waitress looked away, toward the horizon bleeding red with sunset. I don't know who swung the hammer, but I know whose hands held it steady. A chill ran through Claire's bones. Before she could ask more, the woman stepped back, her face taut with fear. I've already said too much. Don't contact me again. Then she hurried toward her car and drove off, leaving Claire alone in the dying light. That night, Claire spread everything on her motel bed. Harker's notebook, Angela's sketches, the courthouse report, the warning note. 6 cousins had walked into the canyon, carrying the weight of secrets that stretched back to their parents. The canyon hadn't just swallowed them. It had been fed. Claire filmed her reflection in the dark motel mirror, her voice low, almost a whisper. The 1993 incident report links 2 of the cousins' parents directly to the canyon rituals. Vehicles registered to Miguel Torres and Elaine Barrett were found at a ritual site. No charges filed. Sheriff closed the case. 3 years later, their children vanished in the same canyon. What if the secret Angela wanted to reveal wasn't teenage drama, but the truth about their parents? What if the disappearance wasn't chance, but consequence? She turned off the camera and sat in the silence. Her mind replayed the words of the man at the clearing. The last ones, they never came back. The last ones were family, and the shadows of Perdido Canyon were closer to home than anyone dared admit. The Torres house stood on the north side of San Isidro. Its adobe walls faded to the color of dust. Claire sat in her car across the street, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Miguel Torres's name on that 1993 report burned in her mind. His son Tomas and daughter Isabel were 2 of the missing 6. If anyone carried the weight of this case, it was him. She stepped out, her notebook tucked under her arm, and walked up the cracked walkway. A wind chime clinked above the porch, a soft, eerie sound. The door opened before she could knock. An older man filled the frame, broad-shouldered, silver hair, eyes that seemed to carry a permanent storm. Mr. Torres? Claire asked. His gaze narrowed. Who are you? Claire Arden. I'm an investigative journalist. I'm looking into what happened in 1996. The silence stretched, heavy. Then, with a grunt, he stepped aside. 5 minutes. The interior was sparse, worn furniture, family photos lining the mantel. A smiling Tomas in a football jersey, Isabel clutching a paintbrush in front of an easel. Their faces caught in a time before shadows. Claire sat, pulse racing. She unfolded a copy of the 1993 incident report and laid it on the coffee table. Miguel's jaw tightened as his eyes fell on it. You were there, she said softly. 3 years before your children vanished. At the canyon. At one of the rituals, his nostrils flared. That's a lie. The report says your truck was found at the site, alongside Elaine Barrett's car. There were fires, bones, symbols. He slammed a fist against the table. The photos rattled. I told them then, and I'll tell you now, I loaned that truck to a friend. That sheriff didn't believe me, and neither do you. But I wasn't there. Claire steadied her voice. Then why was the case shut down? Because this town doesn't want its dirty laundry hung out. Miguel spat. We bury things. Always have his eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. But I didn't hurt my children. Don't you ever suggest I did. Claire swallowed. Do you know what secret Tomas and Angela were fighting about that summer? Miguel's gaze flickered. Just once, but enough. Kids fight, he muttered. That's all, but his voice lacked conviction. The room felt close, suffocating. Claire thanked him and stood, but as she turned toward the door, his voice stopped her. They were good kids, he said, low, almost broken. Whatever we did, whatever mistakes we made before, they didn't deserve that canyon. Claire left with her chest tight, the words echoing in her ears. Whatever we did. That evening she found herself on the other side of town, standing before a white clapboard house with peeling paint. A rocking chair sat abandoned on the porch. This was the Barrett home. Elaine Barrett answered the door, her hair pulled into a severe bun, her eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. She studied Claire with suspicion, but eventually opened the door wider. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and mothballs. A framed portrait of Angela and Michael hung in the hallway, smiling teenagers frozen in time. Elaine perched on the edge of a sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Claire took a deep breath. Mrs. Barrett, I know about the report from 1993. Your car was at the canyon, alongside Miguel Torres's truck. There were symbols, fires, rituals. Elaine's face drained of color. Where did you get that? It doesn't matter. I need to understand what happened that night. Elaine's hands trembled. She shook her head violently. No, that was nothing. Rumors. We were just kids ourselves, hanging out, being stupid. It had nothing to do with the disappearances. Her voice cracked on the last word. Angela knew, Claire said gently. She sketched the symbols. She fought with Tomas about a secret. Was she going to tell? Elaine's eyes brimmed with tears. Angela wanted to burn it all down. She hated secrets. She said if the grown-ups wouldn't tell the truth, she would. She didn't understand what it would cost. Claire leaned forward. What truth? Elaine covered her mouth with shaking hands. I can't. You don't know what you're asking. This town... A sharp knock rattled the front door. Both women froze. Elaine's face turned to stone. You need to leave, she whispered urgently. Now. Who is it? Claire asked. Elaine didn't answer. She ushered Claire toward the back door, her hands cold and desperate on Claire's shoulders. Go. Please, don't come back. Claire stumbled into the night air, her heart hammering. She crouched by a hedge, peering around the side of the house. A dark sedan idled at the curb. Two men in plain clothes stood on the porch, talking quietly with Elaine. She glanced over her shoulder, her face pale. Claire slipped away into the shadows, every nerve alive with dread. Back in her motel, she locked the door and replayed the evening in her head. Miguel Torres, denial wrapped in guilt. Elaine Barrett, panic, half confession, silenced by unexpected visitors. She filmed herself, her face pale in the glow of the camera. Tonight I confronted Miguel Torres and Elaine Barrett. Both denied, both deflected. But beneath it was something else. Guilt, fear. They know more than they've admitted for 27 years. And someone, maybe more than one someone, is making sure they never speak it aloud. She shut off the camera and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep came late, filled with visions of 6 teenagers walking into the canyon, shadows gathering behind them, shadows with familiar faces. Claire arrived at the county records building just after dawn. Sleep had been thin, haunted by Elaine Barrett's trembling voice and the men at her door. She knew if she didn't move quickly, whatever remained of the truth might vanish back into silence. The clerk at the counter barely looked up when she requested access to old sheriff's files. You'll need authorization, he said flatly. Claire slid a folded paper across the desk, a copy of a press credential she carried like a weapon. Freedom of Information Act, Public Records. He hesitated, sighed, and disappeared into the back. Minutes later, he returned with a box labeled Sheriff's Office, 1990 to 1996. Claire carried it to a table, heart pounding. Inside were manila folders, reports, and handwritten logs. She thumbed through them, searching for any link to Perdido Canyon. Then, she found it. Internal memo. May 3rd, 1993. She read aloud under her breath. Deputies instructed to discontinue reports of ritual activity. All future sightings to be referred directly to Sheriff Latham, the very man who had declared the 1996 case unsolvable, who had told grieving parents to stop stirring panic. Claire's skin prickled. He hadn't just ignored the rituals. He had absorbed them. Further down the memo, a chilling note. Community integrity depends on discretion. Not all traditions need public airing. She snapped photos, her hands trembling. Buried beneath another stack was a sealed envelope marked Confidential, Canyon Surveillance. She hesitated only a second before tearing it open. Inside were a handful of photographs, grainy black and white shots taken from a distance. The images showed the canyon rim at night, firelight flickering, robed figures gathered in a circle. In one photo, a man stood apart, his face partially illuminated. Claire gasped. Even blurred, the profile was unmistakable. Sheriff Latham. Her pulse thundered. The sheriff himself had been part of the rituals. And if Angela had threatened to expose the truth, then her disappearance, and the others, was no accident. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Claire glanced toward the doorway. A deputy had entered the records room, his gaze sweeping until it landed on her. She shoved the photos back into the envelope, slid it into her bag, and closed the box. "Everything okay, ma'am?" the deputy asked, his tone too casual. Claire forced a smile. "Fine. Just wrapping up." She walked past him, her bag heavy with evidence, her heart hammering. Back at the motel, she spread the photos across the bed. Fire, robes, the sheriff's profile etched against the night. She whispered to herself. Law enforcement wasn't protecting this town. They were protecting themselves. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Urgent. Meet at the old water tower." Midnight. Her stomach clenched. Another risk. Another shadow. But she couldn't ignore it. That night, the desert air was cool as she drove to the abandoned water tower on the outskirts of town. The structure loomed like a skeleton against the moon. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Elias Rowe, the Historical Society curator. "You shouldn't have gone to the records," he said, his face pale, his hands trembling. "You knew," Claire accused. "You knew the sheriff was involved." Rowe swallowed hard. "I knew enough. Enough to keep my mouth shut all these years. Why now?" He glanced around nervously. "Because you found it. And once you've seen it, there's no going back. They'll come for you, Claire, the same way they came for those kids. Who is they?" she pressed. His eyes glistened with fear. "People you wouldn't suspect. People who wear badges, who sit in church pews, who shake your hand on Main Street. The canyon isn't just wilderness. It's a covenant. One they've been keeping for generations." Claire's voice was a whisper. "And the 6 cousins?" Rowe's face crumpled. "Collateral. They threatened to break the circle, and the circle closed around them." The wind hissed through the water tower's rusted frame. Claire felt as if the ground itself tilted beneath her. Before she could ask more, headlights flared in the distance. A truck roared down the dirt road toward them. Rowe's eyes widened. "They found us." He shoved something into her hands, a small, leather-bound notebook. "Keep this hidden. It's proof." Then he turned and bolted into the darkness. The truck skidded to a stop. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. Claire clutched the notebook and dove behind a tumble of rocks as flashlight beams sliced the night. "Where is she?" a voice barked. Claire's chest heaved as she pressed herself flat against the stone, the leather notebook slick in her hands. Whoever they weren't just shadows of the past. They were alive, organized, and hunting her now. The notebook smelled of leather and dust, its pages brittle with age. Claire sat cross-legged on her motel bed, the curtains drawn tight, a single lamp casting pale light. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were dates, names, and crude sketches of the canyon. Scrawled margins detailed gatherings. March 1991. 14 present, offering made. October 1992. New initiates inducted. Sheriff attended. June 1993. Warning, outsiders saw firelight. Must tighten circle. Claire's stomach churned. The handwriting was meticulous, almost ritualistic in itself. But the most chilling entry came last. July 1996. 6 youth threatened exposure. Covenant chose silence. Blood sealed shadow. She whispered the words aloud, her voice cracking. 6 youth, Covenant chose silence. It wasn't folklore. It wasn't the canyon swallowing them whole. It was orchestrated. Her phone buzzed. A single text appeared from an unknown number. "We know what you have." She snapped the notebook shut, stuffed it into her bag, and paced the room. She had proof, enough to shatter the silence of San Isidro. But proof was worthless if she didn't survive to reveal it. That night she drove toward Perdido Canyon. The desert lay under a brittle moon, the horizon sharp and merciless. She parked near the trailhead where, 27 years earlier, the cousins' cars had waited in vain for their return. Her flashlight cut through the dark as she descended. Each step echoed with memory, Angela's sketches, the sheriff's profile in firelight, Miguel's whispered guilt, Elaine's trembling silence. She reached the flat span of rock where their footprints had ended. The stone gleamed pale under the moon, etched with faint carvings, circles, jagged lines, remnants of the covenant. Claire crouched, breath shallow. She pulled the notebook from her bag, flipping to the sketches. They matched the carvings exactly. Behind her, gravel crunched. She froze. Voices, low, deliberate. More than one. She swung her light. Figures emerged from the dark. 6 men and women, their faces shadowed by hoods. One voice rose above the others. Calm. Authority. "You should have left when we warned you." Claire's heart pounded. She recognized the voice. Sheriff Latham. Older now, but unmistakable. He stepped forward, hood falling back, revealing a lined face, eyes hard as stone. "You've dug up things buried for good reason," he said. "The canyon keeps its silence. Always has." Claire lifted the notebook, her hand trembling. "This proves everything. The rituals, the covenant, what you did to those kids." His lips curled in a faint smile. "Proof means nothing if no one sees it." The circle closed around her. Flashlights flickered like torchlight, casting long, grotesque shadows on the canyon wall. Claire's mind raced. She couldn't overpower them, couldn't outrun them, but she could expose them. Her camera. She fumbled in her bag, pulled out the small device she always carried, and hit record. The red light blinked in the dark. "Say it," she demanded, her voice steady despite the terror rising in her throat. "Say what you did." A ripple moved through the group. Some shifted uneasily. Others sneered. Latham's eyes narrowed. "Turn that off." "No," Claire said. "Not this time." Not after 27 years. He stepped closer, his face filling her lens. "You think the world cares about 6 kids lost in a canyon? Stories fade. People forget. But this town endures because we keep its shadows in place. You want to trade endurance for ruin?" Claire's breath caught. "You killed them." His silence was answer enough. Then, from the canyon rim, sirens wailed. Red and blue lights pulsed against the rock. Voices shouted, "Sheriff Latham! Hands up! The circle broke. Figures scattered. Clare staggered back, blinded by floodlights sweeping down the trail. Armed deputies poured into the clearing. Not the old guard, but younger faces, led by Detective Morales, the one who'd reopened the cold files. "Clare!" Morales shouted. "Over here!" Two deputies pulled her toward safety. The notebook tumbled from her hand, but Morales scooped it up. Latham stood frozen in the light, his hood slipping from his shoulders. His expression hardened, but he raised his hands. Around him, others dropped to their knees, their power dissolved by exposure. Claire's knees buckled. The canyon roared with noise. Radios crackling, orders shouted, the heavy thud of boots. But under it all, she swore she heard another sound, faint and endless. The wind moving through the stone, carrying voices that had waited decades to be heard. As deputies led Latham away in cuffs, his voice cut the air one last time. "You think you've ended it, but shadows don't die. They wait." Clare shuddered, clutching the camera to her chest. She turned it off only when the first pale light of dawn touched the canyon walls, washing blood-red stone in gold. The silence that followed felt different. Not empty, but freed.